Okay, hour number 2. Time for Dr. Bill Deagle to join us. Bill's with us once a week to bring us up to date on all kinds of things. Hello, William. How are you?
Absolutely. The first story got to be Fukushima.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, the WIP plant in Carlsbad, New Mexico.
Well, near Carlsbad. And
yeah. Now, the first update dealing with Fukushima is the issue that they're changing a lot of their plans. Obviously, they're having major leaks. They started releasing lots of water 2 days ago.
Yeah, they're just dumping it
very directly in the Pacific Ocean, which they've been doing before, but now it's carte blanche. That's really damaging. They're now also prevaricating on whether or not they're really keen about this ice wall, because they know it's going to raise the water levels inside the buildings and probably make the ground much more mushy, and more likely that if there's a tremor, it turns the ground into what's called a thixotropic gel, which means everything will subside and fall over very quickly.
Sure.
The situation, of course, is that they had a big earthquake a few weeks ago. It was the biggest since 3/11. The chances of an earthquake that'll turn it into a gel and make the buildings fall over and cause not only pyrophoric fire, but nuclear explosions, hydrogen explosions, and massive releases of radiation is an inevitability. So it's just a matter of time. We're getting burps of radiation, I call it, on top of the constant stream of tritium. The worst thing that people don't realize with tritium, it's a DNA intercalator, which means it moves the codons of your DNA one base pair.
Great.
So it's not a typical radiotoxin. It's what's called a DNA intercalator. So it doesn't, like cosmic rays, blast your DNA. It slides the DNA over one base pair. So it induces mutations that way.
Wow. Well, the idea of them just going ahead and dumping the water, we knew that was coming. They're going to dump all of it sooner or later. They just can't take care of it.
Yeah, the WIP plant is not. I mean, what's called the Advanced Liquid Processing System has never worked properly. They're basically throwing their hands up. It turns out that the Advanced Liquid Processing plant was designed by a company called Energy Solutions out of Salt Lake City, and it turns out the Salt Lake City plant, a company, is the same company that decided to switch at the WIP plant in New Mexico from regular kitty litter that has zeolite and other stabilizers to, quote, green kitty litter to act as a desiccant. And it releases methane and turns all of those canisters in various levels of liquid or solid radioactive waste into a methane bomb, so that they're exploding. And they think this is what caused the WIP plant to blow up.
Now, hold on. Not the whole WIP plant blew up. Just understand that some of the barrels
not the whole
blew
WIP
up.
plant, but all the stuff, material on the ground.
Yeah.
A number of the containers, there's 500 more containers, and they're at various stages. We don't know how much methane is in each container because it probably varies a lot, depending how long they've been sitting there and the nature of the material they're with.
Yeah.
But as they mature, they're releasing helium. Sorry, methane. When the methane is released, it builds up, and if it reaches a critical temperature, they're saying now, according to, if the temperature reaches a critical temperature in the container, then they're likely to blow up.
Okay.
Now, what we try to do is find out from, you recommended this when I called you earlier, Jeff, to find out whether or not the...
is this an industry-wide issue using cat litter to pack these?
We just looked for bids on it. It turns out that it looks like it's the Department of Energy made a policy of this, and the Energy Solutions Company that contracts with WIP and other sites carried through this. So when I checked with Chris Harris, our nuclear expert, that's his radio name, he said it's almost certain that this is a U.S. Department of Energy policy to go green.
Oh, my God.
Which means that they're probably sitting at Hanford and other sites around the country where they're using the wrong form of kitty litter, and it's accumulating methane on top of these storage containers of nuclear radioactive waste.
The storage, let's slow down here. The storage containers, let's say, are 55-gallon drums, just for the sake of visual. They put the plutonium or the whatever, the iridium, I don't care what it is in there, something that's bad. Then they dump kitty litter. They actually dump kitty litter in there to desiccant, to try to desiccate it, to keep it dry, to dry it up. But the problem is, a lot of the kitty litter is the wrong kind, because when it breaks down, it's an organic or a natural, it turns into methane gas. So you've got these 55-gallon drums that all of a sudden have a methane gas production unit in it that causes them to blow. They'll pop.
Right. So we'll have more data next week, but according to Chris, and he's checked with some of his colleagues, he's pretty sure it's a National Department of Energy to go green, which is why when it, not just with this company, Energy Solutions, but that is probably a policy that they're using.
As I said, the bids are there. You'll see them. I just said find them if you can.
Yeah,
they're there.
We're digging in to find that. So that's the latest update, which means it goes from stupid to
be unbelievable. All right, we're talking about maybe tens of thousands of these 55-gallon drums. Let's just use that term. And they're all packed with the wrong kitty litter, and they could all start to blow up. We might have thousands of bombs, nuclear bombs sitting around the country. Dirty bombs is what they'd be.
But this is typical because it turns out that TEPCO is just an umbrella company, a management company, and they subcontract to American contractors like this Energy Solutions Company out of Salt Lake City, which handled the advanced liquid processing system for TEPCO to pull out the strontium and cesium and so on, but they never ever succeeded in pulling out the heavier isotopes. They were trying to. So what's happening? The ALPS system doesn't work.
They're dumping leaking from
massive amounts of radioactive water in the ocean. And they didn't do anything. For example, my book is almost finished. I'm hoping to get it completed over the weekend. But what we're going to do is put the communications back and forth and the brainstorming with Chris Harris and other nuclear experts that I've done over the last 3 years.
Got it.
We know that they should have put a seawall up. They should have never tried to put an ice wall. They should have put a system of diversion of the aquifer above it, which should have been done with a series of vertical, you want to call gates, probably concrete pods or whatever that can be interlocked.
Sure.
Not something that could be affected like an ice wall, where if you puncture it, you get a massive explosion of radioactive isotopes, or putting it down below the reactor, below the reactor, but before the escarpment and down over into the ocean, which would guarantee that the water levels are going to rise not only in the entire site, but also inside these buildings that are highly radioactive. So everything they did is insane. Everything they did.
Everything
and of course,
they did is insane.
This is another major update. New documents released that admit that virtually the entire team of management, except for what's called the site workers, are actually managing the reactor room, all left as soon as this event happened in March 11th, 3 years ago. So they basically said, we're out of here. And they
90+% left. They fled.
Yeah, only the small little percentage, which are basically the Fukushima 50, these people sitting around that were going to monitor and try to see if they could move the hydrogen out so they didn't have a hydrogen explosion in the torus.
Sure.
Or people that were going to try to go in and try to prevent the reactor core
from melting down. They're all dead by now, most of them.
A very, very small, brave group, but beyond that, everybody else just said, we're out of here. This is nuts.
And that would happen here too, folks. Don't kid yourself.
Right. Well, it's also, in a sense, happening with Ebola in Africa. What's happening is they're trying to quarantine everybody, including the nurses and doctors, and the nurses and doctors are hiding. So we have a number of airborne plagues that are about to emerge. The first one is probably going to be hitting us is the beta coronavirus. The second is most likely going to be H7N9 coming out of China, which is now spread to all of the local countries. And the third is likely to be Ebola. Of the three, the one that's most likely to be most deadly is H7N9. Ebola is so deadly that it probably is going to, it'll probably be stopped cold after it kills so many people. Whereas H7N9 is the fastest replicating virus, flu virus in human history. It replicates way faster on a logarithmic scale than any other flu virus, and it has a high case fatality rate. So my guess is when it gets to North America, the SARS is very bad too. And all of these have unusually long incubation periods, so they can shed virus for a long time before the person gets sick.
MERS.
Yeah. MERS, H7N9, they can incubate and shed virus for a long time before the person goes south. So that's with the wet plant, there's 500 containers apparently that potentially have kitty litter in them.
Now they were all put in these. Let's give them an idea. Quarter mile under the ground, big salt caverns. They hollowed them out. They made a big storage repository. They started to put these, let's call them 55-gallon drums, whatever they are. They're containers about that size. They got kitty litter, methane-producing gas, kitty litter in them. They've got plutonium, weapons grade. They were from old warheads and leftovers and all the rest of it. And they are all potentially going to explode. They cannot go back in there and do this. That's the point. They're going to try and just bury it all.
Yeah, and the problem is they don't have like a plan B, C, or D.
They don't have even a plan A.
Well, the problem is even just trying to it's estimated that there's somewhere around, potentially, this is what Chris said today, 10,000 of these containers with the upgraded kitty litter.
I knew it. I said there were thousands.
Yeah, he said 10,000 is what he estimates. But again, he's got to.
They're all over the country too. They're not. There. How many different sites are they located at? Do we know?
We don't really know.
They're going to have to go in there and take them all out and repackage them. Who wants to do that?
The first thing we got to do is follow the bids, like you said. Second is to follow Energy Solutions and find if there's other companies that follow federal policy under the Department of Energy. So there could be more than one company, and we need to follow at least Energy Solutions to all the sites where they use this funny kitty litter for packaging and storing nuclear radioactive waste. So, this is a keystone cops of nuclear, insanity.
We're on borrowed time so much.
Yeah, a lot of time people say, well, that's just your conspiracy theory. And no, it's not.
No.
We actually have a scientist that reported this, that Chris talked to personally, and the other members of his NRC team, and he's reporting this. This is exactly what happened, that they pulled the kitty litter. So they have his public name, so it's properly journalistically reported. And it's not a joke. This is real serious. Wow. And I don't know how long ago the policy was put in place. My guess it was during Obama, because Obama has a very strange policy. He's closing down all the coal-fired generators in the country, and he's at the same time not putting scrubbers on the ones to make sure that they're not polluting.
Correct.
But, because most of them are pretty good. What he's doing is he's not upgrading the nuclear plants to make them safe, and
not doing anything.
So, right, they're doing nothing. But he is pushing new nuclears, so they have 2 new nuclear plants that are opening up in Georgia, and a bunch more on the line. They're
great.
Coming.
He wants to build them. Sure, that's the solution.
By the way, there's another side. It turns out that Putin now has decided to contract with Iran. They're building 8 more large nuclear reactors in Iran.
In Iran, that's nuts. I don't get it. They should lead the way.
I think it's like a gotcha to the West.
Yeah, well, okay, I got you.
Got at least 8 more countries that they've already contracted through in the last few months to build in South Africa and Taiwan, all kinds of countries where they're building nuclear reactors.
Every nuclear reactor brings us one step closer to mass genocidal death.
And the problem is the French and the Americans are building, like General Electric, lots of reactors inside China. And yes, they're slightly improved, but they all have the major defects of massive amounts of on-site storage. They have problems with, even if they have pebble bed reactors, they all vent off thorium and tritium and other DNA, damaging radioisotopes. They're all extremely dangerous in terms of the power line, how much power they generate, and how much waste is generated that they don't get rid of. So these really don't, on the balance sheet, make sense. And all of them, of course, proliferate nuclear weapons because all the reactors that are being built in China and being built by Rosatom from Russia all are able to generate high-grade plutonium for nuclear warheads.
Unbelievable. Well, there we go. It's right there. We've been talking about it for years. It's madness. It's insanity. And we now have over 10,000 dirty nuclear bombs buried here and there, sitting here and there, full of this methane-producing kitty litter. Unreal.
Well, if somebody said that to me, tongue-in-cheek, and I was sitting at a bar, I'd say, you got a bad sense of humor. And that there's no way anybody would believe it. But we got the scientist's name, we have the proof, we know the company that was doing it, we even have the policy that was coming from the Department of Energy. I mean, this is nuts, and it's a multi-layered nuts. It's like, oh my gosh. So, as much as I go from day to day thinking I can't get shocked, every day I search this, and lately, since the New Year, I've had pretty bad insomnia, and I don't think it's medical. I think my insomnia is news-induced.
Well, it's news-induced. You also are sensitive. You're an intuitive.
I'm sensitive to what I see coming. What I see is right out of the book of Genesis. The judgment of water came. Yeah. The judgment of fire is coming.
Yeah.
And the word nuclear fire is here. All these sea creatures dying is going to be followed very shortly by a lot of land-based creatures dying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't know how much
of the owls are going. You're going to start seeing people develop signs of acute low-level radiation sickness and with massive bursts of radiation, which is why we have, as you discovered, blocking highs off the Pacific coast, and they don't need the HARP anymore. They have much more advanced technology to modify the upper atmosphere. They've even admitted publicly. They have a public statement by the people dismantling HARP in Alaska saying, well, we don't need that. We have other ways of modifying the upper ionosphere. I'm thinking, duh. For decades, people thought, well, their last prayer at night when they go to bed is, thank you, Jesus, for a great day, and thank you, God, for making me confirm that Deagle is nuts and everything he says is BS. But it's not true.
No.
And that's the problem, you see. I tell on my show, the most important thing is don't believe me, ask better questions. Do your own research. Travel at your own speed.
Well, people don't want to do that, unfortunately. So thank goodness they have you to tell them, because they don't have time.
I'm going to tell them straight up, whether it's religious truth, and I had a show the other day that if people want to go back to the archives, they'll get a few chuckles. Mm-hmm. And we had a three-way conversation, and I said I'm an equal opportunity iconoclast. I will rip and tear any political, religious, or other group, scientific group, to shreds, because if they deserve it.
We got to get you to move up here to Southern Oregon. It's the safest place in the country.
Yeah, well,
it doesn't matter where you are. Look, the Fukushima stuff, it's going to hit the coast, but we're 150 miles inland, nothing but 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000 foot mountains. HEPA filters will help. That jet stream can take that stuff up and bring it right down the Midwest, right smack down the Mississippi
River. Well, that's where it's going,
River
actually. We now know that it's heading north toward Idaho, is diving across the Midwest, shoots back up against the Northeast, heads across the Atlantic over the Gulf of...
So in a way, parts of the West Coast, especially the lower Northwest, are actually safe. Safer than many other places. So there's nowhere to run.
It's bypassing, and it's at a higher altitude, too.
That's right.
Yeah. In fact, it's more likely to actually head straight across the pole. So a lot of the heavy isotopes are showing up in Finland and Czech Republic, and not because it's going around the whole planet. It's because it's going transpolar.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I talked to the pilots about that. They're pretty sure that there are air currents that will carry directly over the pole.
Yeah, and that has to do with the diminution of the ozone hole, too. The actual diminution of the ozone.
I've been putting together pieces of this, and here's what I think is a climate scenario that I find incredibly scary. And I think this is holding more and more water. We know we're moving toward a Maunder-type ice age. And Dr. Easterbrook, Dr. Habibullah Alimazatov from the Russian Space Agency, about 30-some other scientists.
Well, Robert Felix has been documenting this for a long time, too.
Right, here's a little kind of a twist in this that may blow that out of the water. Everywhere on the planet, there's massive amounts of methane hydrates being released.
I know, and that's coming up from the bottom of the ocean, folks, just so you know. Let me do one thing. Hold on. You got a good point. We're just into methane hydrate. I want to play this little clip. Now, this is Deputy Assistant Secretary of the United States Air Force for Science, Technology, and Engineering. Can you say Black Ops? All right, now here's this guy, David Walker, and he's going to tell you about HARP. For those of you who say, it's HARP. Well, you 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you were right. Now listen to what the man says about HARP. All right, this is very important.
I mentioned that it's our understanding through the president of UAF that the plans are to move forward and demolish the facility this summer. So the question to you is that accurate? Can you explain why? And then perhaps to both you and Mr. Schaefer, is there any benefit in exploring a potential relationship with the University of Alaska to perhaps take over the HARP?
Thank you, Senator. The Air Force has gotten great value out of HARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it. But that work has been completed. The Air Force has maintained the site for other government agencies to use for several years now. And with DARPA completing their project, that's our last government customer that we have in the site. We have put out a call, government...
Okay, well, you heard him say it. It's done. They're going to tear it down if they can't give it away. They've got new technology. They got all they could out of it. So Bill is right. And the blocking high-pressure systems that I was able to figure out and put up, I'm not patting myself on the back.
That was remarkable. Good observation.
Well, thank you. But it just stunk. And you look at some of those angles are right angles, for God's sakes.
Here's the consequence of that. It's not predicted by the Weather Service here in Florida, in Southern California, that the fire season this year will be the worst in half a millennium.
Well, time to move north, William.
Well, last week on Tuesday, we not only had pyromaniacs, at least 2 of them, but we had 9 fires within 10 miles of where I live. You could go and look in every direction because we're 1,200 feet on the side of a blue granite mountain, about 10 miles inland, and I could look, and in every direction there was a fire. And luckily the smoke was moving out to sea. Otherwise, we'd be choking on it.
That's your Santa Ana wind blowing from the
right,
northeast.
and those Santa Anas, by the way, they're weird. You have positive ions, and even when it's not hot, it's a choky kind of positive ion mess, a soup that wires up your nervous system, makes you feel
you get
awful.
dingy. Sure.
You feel like you're hanging by your toenails. It's weird.
I know. We used to get those in Santa Barbara very fiercely. Listen, when are you going to come up here and look around? Think about it. Talk to Michelle.
I got to do a sales job. First I have myself and then my wife. What I see coming, though, is this. Here's what I think is going to happen. This summer, they already evacuated a number of people in different areas, at least temporarily. This summer, though, I think the fire season will peak probably around July, and it's probably going to get so bad that we're going to have several things happen. The first thing, you're going to have some form of statewide or regional martial law, where they're going to actually forcibly evacuate people at gunpoint, which basically the sheriffs were already doing. In Carlsbad,
they're not evacuating; they're killing them.
Well, the problem is, right now, when Obama came out to so-called deal with the fact it was going to be bad fires, he didn't do anything to appropriate more material, more equipment. We have a new material called Barricade Fire Gel, and we're going to be putting it up on our website. This Barricade actually will protect your home from fires, and people need to get it. We're going to have it up here shortly on NutriMedical.com. But that's only kind of like a Band-Aid.
How do you use it?
You spray it on your roof in any areas you don't want to burn, and your house can't burn. Not possible.
I saw Santa Barbara. Before I got to take a break, Santa Barbara fire captain showed me he had developed a product. It was a clear paint, if you will. He painted it on wood and showed me with an acetylene torch, it wouldn't catch fire. It was clear.
Yeah,
and he was trying to sell it. It was suppressed.
Yeah, that's really good. This gel you spray over your roof with a hose attachment, and you can cover your whole roof and anything else that could be set like trees, and they just can't go on fire.
Yeah, well, that's what
so
he
just
found.
Hook it to a hose and just walk around your property and spray everything, and the fire gel persists and stays there. Mm-hmm. And during the fire season, you're not going to end up with your house or your trees.
This was a clear liquid, and it dried, and that was the end of it. No fire. Nothing would burn. Yeah. All right, hold on a minute.
So solutions, yeah.
Yeah, we got to do this. We'll be right back. Hold on. Okay, here we are back with Dr. Bill, talking about a lot of different things already. Bill tends to go fast, but you've got the archives to listen to. You can always take a listen and go slow. All right, now, you were just starting something and I interrupted you. What was it? Can't remember. Anyway, on to the next subject.
Yeah, I think we've we're going to have updates next week on what's going on in Fukushima, but their mismanagement just blows me away every week. And what we also have we have more reports coming back on the nuclear testing to see if they can withstand earthquakes across all the nuclear reactor sites in America. And there's many different sites that we don't have all the data yet, but we've got a bunch that we posted up. We're going to post up more by next. And some very extensive reports, and most of them are either failing or saying they need further study because they think they're going to fail, which means the majority of our nuclear sites, at least half of them, are in strike zones where they're not rated to be able to withstand an earthquake sufficient to cause loss of containment. That's a lot.
Wow. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Right. And either a nuclear site that's near a reactor, near a fault line, or it's near a tsunami zone.
We don't know how much, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know how much of the Pacific Ocean is dead now. But it could be an enormous percentage of the mammals and the sea life in the sea are gone. We don't know.
Well, you're going to have what's called an elbow effect, which means you're going to start seeing effects on the unborn and the elderly, where you'll see a lot of increase in die-off. in the intensive care nurseries. But then all of a sudden, you're going to start seeing younger people and middle-aged people and relatively healthy people get acute radiation sickness. The first signs of that are going to be changes in behavior, dramatic increases in allergies to foods, to inhalants, everything, because these radiotoxins, when they attach to allergens because they're charged molecules, they make them tens of thousands to millions of times more allergenic. And that'll increase autoimmune disease, cancer, and deterioration. So if you have any genetic or toxic weakness, it's going to trigger off disease to start much more quickly. Cardiac arrhythmias, deterioration in behavior, depression, suicide, violence, radiotoxin-induced zombie-like behavior because it affects cholinergic pathways. We already know, for example, that ultraviolet light from the thinning ozone layer and the radiotoxins are increasing domoic acid in the algae, which are constituted by the zooplankton eaten by shrimp and other bivalves as food for fish, and the fish are concentrating domoic acid, which causes permanent cholinergic damage to your brain. And if it damages enough, the respiratory drive center shuts off and you can't breathe if you're a fish, or if you're a person, you become demented. So these kind of things are going to start to increase at an ever-increasing pace. And what the government's worried about, obviously the global government, is they don't want people to get acutely sick, like nosebleeds. 68% of the Japanese in northern Japan are children that have nosebleeds, loose teeth, all kinds of signs of acute radiation sickness. We have children that are dying of cardiac arrhythmias and heart failure at 10 and 12 years of age now in Japan.
They're dying of worse than that, too. I mean, when you have teenage tweens and teens dying of a heart attack and the government says nothing, I cannot tell you the contempt and hatred I have for the Japanese government, what they're doing to those people. I cannot even begin to tell you. There is an ongoing negotiation which has been tentatively agreed to by Brazil and by elements in Japanese society to make room in Brazil, which, by the way, is larger than the United States, for as much of the populace of Japan as wants to come as can come. And the Japanese, being very industrious, will have no radiation with them to speak of except that which they have inhaled and been imbued with food. They will come and they will build a metropolis in the middle of nowhere in Brazil. So that's a possible. Right. They need to move now, not in. Well,
they've already moved a bunch of Japanese rich people to Kerala, southwest India.
Well, in India, there's a space. That's right. There's a place in India. Yep.
Kerala, India. Yeah. So already a lot of the rich and mobile within months after the March 11th incident.
They got out. Brazil's the big one.
Yeah. We have a lot of also Japanese that even moved here to California and the West Coast because there's large Japanese and Asian communities here, and the relative amount of radiation is relatively low. But the problem is people don't understand that it's going to be bioaccumulation that's going to get us. There's no sign that there's going to be a let-up in the amount of radiation released in large burps and constant streaming over the next decades, and there's no indication that any team of scientists is putting together ideas like I put together in this ebook that's going to actually fix the problem so it stops the massive radiation release. One other incident happened is the OI reactor. They tried to restart it, and the courts blocked it, which is a good sign. It means that at least somebody in the courts is realizing this is nuts. And the OI reactor, by the way, was damaged. If I remember correctly, that one lost 440 gallons of highly radioactive water when one of the containment areas got broken. One of the earthquake.
It's OI, isn't it? I don't know.
OI, yeah, OI. It's OI. Yeah. I'm damaging the pronunciation of the Japanese reactor.
We got it.
It's close enough that people say, "What's he mean by that?" Well, OI. They can work it out.
Sure.
One of the things that we talked about in the show, a NutriMedical report, was the 27 huge red flags for the U.S. economy. There's 12 states in the United States that are going to be probably bankrupt by next year. We have a massive population where the biggest growth industry is social welfare. And when the cash stops, when the food stamps stop, when people can't get gas in their car, when the dollar's devalued, and for everybody, the middle class, their pension funds are gone, and people can't buy toothpaste, they're going to go, as Charles Salenti says, they're going to go nuts.
Sure.
And I think it's closer rather than farther away. And during that same time, they want to get rid of net neutrality, so you're going to have biometric authentication in order to get on the internet. or to get into secure buildings like government buildings. They already have that policy in place.
Yeah.
You're going to see the devaluation of the dollar, which will kill the third and second world, and it'll also mean that over time there'll be a gradual move of industry back to America. But I see them converting the Fed Reserve into a world reserve bank. I don't think that all these moves by Russia are not without choreography. The Russians are players, and all the Russians did was change hats. But right through even the Cold War, we were collaborating to make sure they were adequate and competent candidates.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all for public consumption. It's a lot.
All right, hold on a second. We'll come right back with Dr. Bill as we continue with our weekly update. Okay, back with Dr. Bill. All right, Bill, go ahead.
I've got an interesting report here, and this is a scientific journal abstract.
Uh-huh.
They now have a set of genetic and metabolic screening tests, a blood test, etc., that can actually identify the markers of electromagnetic hypersensitivity. So we now have these tests. It's published in the Mediators of Inflammation 2014. So I'm going to be posting these up at NutriMedical.com. There are specific tests done and specific genes that can be tied to multiple chemical sensitivity and electrosensitivity, as well as specific genes as well. And what people should understand is that we are being pummeled on every side now by electrotoxins, by increased cosmic background radiation because the ozone layer is being destroyed, by increased levels of pollution, the introduction of nanoparticles into the engineering and industrial processes, and the spread of pathogens around the world that most people don't realize that almost every disease, including cancer and autoimmune disease, has the presence of stealth pathogens. For example, we discovered as early as the 1950s and 60s that Mycoplasma incognita was present in Mycoplasma hominis in rheumatoid arthritis. Whether it's lupus, there's a presence of Mycoplasma and stealth viruses present. In cancer, we have intracellular organisms. So basically, whenever you get a tissue that gets into a redox state, a low redox state, hypoxia, it accumulates biotoxins, heavy metals, and stealth pathogens. So people should understand that the mnemonic I use when I'm trying to help people is called INDOCTOR, I-N-D-R. Investigate, normalize the bioplasmatic body. You have to detoxify the heavy metals and toxic chemicals and finally restore. And it's a very complex process. There are simple parts to it, but it's a very complex process that has ways of validating it using testing, imaging, and other ways to prove that we're not just randomly, throwing, quote, vitamins at it, or a biological, super concentrated form of a specific nutrient, or a special form of it, like we just had this week. We're releasing a liposomal form, a unique product, propionyl L-carnitine, to turn off colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, and cardiac and coronary artery spasm, as well as congestive heart failure. So those are biochemical things. You can actually validate it using clinical evaluation, but also testing. So the science of functional medicine, which is living pathology, is getting very advanced now. The medical profession is not, by and large, keeping up. This is published literature, like this article I mentioned here. There's other articles recently in the International Journal of Environmental and Public Health, the European Journal of Internal Medicine, etc. So there are doctors that are doing more advanced work, but it's not widely read. The problem is the body of knowledge is getting so big that doctors can't stay competent. And what we have is the healthcare system, both in social countries and in countries where they have insurance, keeps doctors running in a gerbil cage where they have to do basically duties that should be done by nurse practitioners or by technicians or other people.
Right.
And so it's like having an engineer turning bolts or welding. And it's a waste of the doctor's time when the doctor should, if he needs to spend an hour with a patient, he should be able to, whether he's operating or just talking to the patient, taking a better history, and using his intellectual capacity to investigate, to find the cause of the problem, and change the whole paradigm of how to treat illness.
Correct.
Because medicine is an art based on science, and we've lost both the art and the science of wellness and the application of the inductive and deductive logic.
Absolutely.
So that's why the healthcare system, like the Obamacare, is the perfect example of a system where they set protocols. Kaiser Permanente is another good example, where I was interviewing 25 years ago, plus to take a job at Kaiser between jobs when I was doing occupational medicine. And when I came into the room that was actually receiving the calls, they had a 26-year-old male that called in with perfect symptoms that he was having a cardiac attack, a heart attack. Mm-hmm. And they ignored the symptoms because he was 26 and didn't send out an ambulance to pick him up. So he tried to drive himself to the hospital, and he wrapped his front end of his vehicle around a light pole and died on the spot. So this is the kind of stupidity that happens because, when you hear hoofbeats and you're in Africa in the Transvaal, it very likely could be zebras. Mm-hmm. But if you're in Montana, most likely it's wild horses. Mm-hmm. And the problem is they don't use common sense, deductive or inductive logic, or use the best investigative ways of finding out what's wrong. The same way with geopolitical issues, when we have Obama not fixing for example, using scrubbers to fix what's coming out of the coal-fired generators, but closing them down, and then trying to push nuclear reactors with technology that's out of date and dangerous, we have a bunch of idiots running our government. A lot of them are being pushed around by...
They're worse than that.
But then they're also pushed around by big corporations that are transnational.
Yeah.
So I call it Earth Inc.
Yeah, right.
Earth Inc., the corporation of the planet Earth, the total fusion of corporate greed and power with all the governments, and they've literally stretched the skins of former nations like they killed wild animals of nations over the superstructure of now a large beast like the Terminator that now runs the planet. And every nation is just a territorial zone for the corporations to feed off of.
Right.
That's what it is.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And that's why there's no real court system. That's why we live under administrative injustice.
No courts, no
that's
judges.
Why we have administrative law. We don't even really have a system of voting. We just vote for a different form of left or right paradigm so that the corporations can make us think we have autonomy or representation, when in actual fact, they decide in boardrooms exactly what they're going to do to us, and they market it through all the marketing agencies because they own them too.
Yep.
So
and, look at the primaries. Same old. They're sending everybody back. Nothing new.
Exactly. So, when you see, for example, when you see little Rand Paul, he may say a lot of good things about pro-life, this and that, because he wants the Christian vote, but then he's sucking up to the Israelis, and the Israelis are the most dangerous nation on earth. They are not our allies.
Yeah.
Now, I personally think that God's going to deal with them. But they're reprobates, and they've been not only stealing our industrial secrets and passing it on to our enemies, but they're also a rogue nation where we have to sit on them with an entire division to make sure they don't attack Iran. I don't think that Obama has enough force of character, or crazy Biden, the Cheshire cat, to actually stop the Israelis from doing something very stupid very soon, which means the response by the Russians to say, well, guess what? We're just going to build 8 more nuclear reactors. Have a nice day, Israel. And I think that we're marching toward Armageddon. And if I was an observer from another world and I tuned to the channel called the live channel of Earth, you can just see across the galaxy hundreds of thousands of civilizations eating popcorn and drinking down their galactic soda and wondering what's going to be on the program next, but it's all bad.
Bad scene.
It's all bad.
Yep.
I'm just trying to use a little humor here. And what I say in the tagline of my show is, I just want you to ask better questions, because what people have been taught in their education or religion is they don't ask questions. They live with their cognitive dissonance almost like it's their teddy bear.
No, they memorize and they spit back. That's all they do.
Yeah, well, for example, I'll pull an issue that will probably aggravate and inflame some people, but that's what I do. I had Dr. Ted Brower, who knew a lot of the recent presidents, and he's a top PhD nutritionist, and I had Tim Alexander on. And Tim wasn't a Roman Catholic. He switched over to Orthodox. But we were talking about the issue of, I call myself, I'm a Messianic Christian. Some people may say I'm a different kind. Well, I'm what I am, okay? But I'm a believer that God intervenes in the lives of mankind, and he calls people to hear and do God's will and do it. It's real simple. It's not complicated. But I asked him, I said, when the Roman Catholic Church got rid of people like Mary Magdalene, who was a senior apostle, and she just basically said, you don't need to have mediators, you don't have to have sacraments, you don't have to have a priesthood in order to have a relationship with God. All that was excised out of the early church by the church fathers because they wanted to make sure they maintained the control of the people. So, in fact, it was against the law for you to read the Bible separately without a priest because up until, I think, 1870, if you did, it was a mortal sin and you'd go to hell. Now, one of the most horrendous things in the church, and these are all observed from ancient paganism, was the transubstantiation of the host into a body of Jesus and the wine into his blood. And I asked a simple question. I said, did Jesus do that before he went to the cross? And they can answer no. He didn't do it. I said, well, then why did he give the authority to the bishops? And they followed this in the Church of England after they mutually excommunicated each other. Not only the Eastern and Western Orthodox Church excommunicated each other over this issue. And you can pick the same thing with Buddhism, with Islam. Every public religion does one thing. It sets up a priest class, it sets up sacraments, it sets up procedures that you have all these reasons why you have to be separated from God. And I tell people, the spirit that's in you is God. The soul that's in you is trying to collaborate with that spirit to become an eternal being and to get authority to intervene and change the world. Mm-hmm. And when you do good, you hear that spirit, which is God, and you do God's will, which connects you to not only nature but each other, so you don't do evil things to each other.
It's the golden
That's real
rule.
simple. It's called hear and do.
Yeah.
And people make it complicated, or they get a priest class, or they have altars, and they have all these different things like purgatory and novena cards, and it doesn't matter what religion it is. They all are abominations. So I quoted the statement. I said, "Behold, Babylon the great, mother of harlots," from the book of Revelation from John the Revelator. And I said, well, who is that, Dr. Ted? And he said, that's the Roman Catholic Church. And I said, but who are the daughter harlots? It's all the Christian churches. All of them. They all have filthy rags on them. And by the way, the Christian churches are probably the best of the lot, because then you got Islam, you got Buddhism, you got all these isms, including transhumanism or agnosticism, and they're all full of things where they have decided what is good or evil without consulting the Creator. And that's because part of us is the Creator. The Spirit in us is God. We don't want to accept that responsibility because we are handing over authority to maniacs to rule our country and rule our world and drive us into destruction. And we're all heading, because of this priest class and these sacraments and all these altars and everything, separating us from our responsibility of actually doing the will collectively that's going to transform our world and will ascend as a civilization. That's the real gospel, the ascension of mankind. And all of these false religions, including most of the denominations, are all putting people in a position of being victims and being literally massively, cataclysmically aborted. The entire planet is slated for abortion.
Well, it sounds logical to me, however unpleasant it is.
And it's real simple. It's real simple. You don't need a priest class or a building. You just need to hear and do. And it's common sense, and it just makes sense to your soul.
All right. Well said. Summed it up again.
There you go.
All right. You take care of yourself.
Ask better questions. Don't believe me. Just kind of ponder it.
Get ready for your trip up to the Northwest. Okay.
There you go. Right. That's another big project.
Okay. All right, Bill. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Take care, everyone. Take action.
Right. Okay. Good night.